Welcome back to the Rock and Turner Investment Podcast. We're excited to have you join us for another episode filled with valuable insights and expert analysis to help shape all of your investment decisions.
Today, we're talking about the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They're making some moves, and these moves could really shake things up on the world stage. And you sent over some fascinating analysis of this, including excerpts from a report with a title that, honestly, when I first saw it, sent chills down my spine. Destabilization of the existing global order.
Yeah, a title like that, it definitely grabs your attention, and for good reason. This isn't just theoretical. We're talking about potential changes that could rewrite the rules of global finance and challenge the established order in a way we haven't seen in decades.
The report mentions a BRICS summit happening soon. What makes this particular meeting the talk of the town?
It's all about the timing, really. The 16th annual summit, it's scheduled for October 22nd to the 24th in Kazan, Russia. And it's happening against a backdrop of, frankly, unprecedented global tension. You've got the war in Ukraine, ongoing instability in the Middle East, and the ever-present worry about potential conflict over Taiwan. Each of these situations is volatile on its own, but together, they create the sense of uncertainty that makes this BRICS summit incredibly significant.
So it's like the world is holding its breath, and into this already tense environment steps this bloc of nations, some arguably not the West's biggest fans, right?
Well,
talking about reshaping the global order.
Exactly. And attendance at this summit is telling.
Yeah.
We're expecting over 24 countries, not just the core BRICS members. This signals that we're not just talking about some regional realignment. This is a global conversation about the future of power and influence.
And one of the big topics at the heart of that conversation, the U.S. dollar. The report suggests the BRICS nations, with Russia at the forefront, are looking to, dethrone the dollar as the dominant global currency. You mentioned de-dollarization. What does that look like in practice?
It's a complex process, but essentially it means reducing reliance on the U.S. dollar for international transactions. They're talking about creating a new payments infrastructure, potentially involving digital currencies or even a BRICS-specific currency. Whether or not that's feasible in the long run is a whole other discussion.
That sounds incredibly ambitious. But what's Russia's motivation here? Why are they so adamant about this shift?
To understand that, you have to look at the bigger picture. Remember the sanctions imposed on Russia after their invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah.
Those hit their economy hard. By championing this de-dollarization effort, Russia aims to reduce the impact of those sanctions and any future ones, essentially limiting the U.S.'s ability to exert financial pressure on a global scale.
So there's a definite element of power play at work here.
Absolutely. But it's crucial to understand that the BRICS nations are not a monolith. Each member has its own motivations and internal politics.
Okay, let's break down those individual players a bit. Who's aligning with Russia on this and who's hesitant?
Well, China sees an opportunity here. They've been strategically laying the groundwork for a while now, establishing alternative payment platforms, forging currency agreements. This initiative plays right into their long-term goal of making the yuan a dominant global currency, which would further solidify their position as a global superpower.
That tracks, always thinking long-term strategy. What's India's take on all of this?
India's position is more nuanced. While they recognize the strategic advantage of lessening reliance on the dollar, they're wary of China's growing influence within the bloc and hesitant, especially regarding a shared BRICS currency.
So a bit of internal friction within BRICS. What about some of the newer members, like Saudi Arabia and the UAE? They've got to be weighing their options carefully.
Absolutely. They're intrigued by the idea of diversifying away from the dollar, but they have these deep-rooted economic ties to the U.S. to consider. It's a delicate balancing act for them. Then you have Brazil and South Africa, both primarily focused on economic development. They see this as a chance for greater financial independence, a system that benefits developing nations more equitably.
A real mix of motivations. Speaking of which, we can't forget Iran, whose involvement adds a whole other layer of complexity to the situation. The report really emphasizes their role. What are they hoping to achieve?
Iran's involvement is particularly interesting because, for them, challenging the U.S.-led system is as much a geopolitical priority as it is a religious one. They see it as pushing back against Western hegemony, which aligns with their revolutionary ideology.
So while other nations might be primarily motivated by economic or strategic goals, Iran injects this element of ideology into the mix.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this is where things could get really interesting, because that ideological stance might lead them to push for more radical changes within BRICS, potentially creating tension with other members, especially China. While China is certainly looking to enhance its global standing, they also value their economic ties with the West and might not want to be seen as aligning too closely with Iran's more anti-Western rhetoric.
It sounds like navigating those internal dynamics within BRICS will be just as crucial as navigating the relationship with the existing global order.
Without a doubt. And this is where the report draws a parallel that's, quite frankly, unnerving. It compares the current geopolitical climate to the fragility of the world just before the end of the Cold War.
Wow. Okay, so we're not just talking about economic policy here. We're talking about a potential seismic shift in the global balance of power. And the report doesn't shy away from highlighting potential conflicts that could arise from this shift.
It doesn't. And understanding Iran's role in all of this is crucial to grasping the full scope of what's at stake.
So we're talking about Iran potentially using this BRICS alliance to further its own geopolitical goals. What does the report highlight as the specific concerns there?
Well, the report highlights Iran's history of supporting groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, which are designated as terrorist organizations by many Western nations, as well as their support for Shia militias in Iraq and the Houthi movement in Yemen. Their involvement in these conflicts adds a layer of complexity to the BRICS situation, you see.
It sounds like there's a real concern that Iran could leverage a shift in global financial power to bolster these groups, potentially escalating existing conflicts.
Precisely. And this puts the other BRICS members in a tricky position. Do they condone or even tacitly support these actions for the sake of maintaining the alliance? Or do they risk fracturing BRICS by taking a stand against Iran? It's a delicate balancing act with potentially significant consequences.
Okay, so we've got this web of complex motivations, potential conflicts. But even if we set aside the geopolitical concerns for a moment, can this new system they're proposing even work? I mean, it's one thing to talk about a new global currency or a new payments infrastructure, but actually building it, ensuring its stability, getting enough countries on board, that's a whole other beast.
You're absolutely right. It's a massive undertaking. We're talking about establishing trust, ensuring liquidity, navigating incredibly complex regulatory frameworks. And then there are the geopolitical hurdles. The report specifically points out the distrust between China and India, which could easily complicate efforts to implement a unified BRICS strategy.
So even within BRICS, there are significant obstacles, competing ambitions, and potential points of friction that could derail this whole initiative.
Exactly. And this is where Iran's involvement becomes even more intriguing. While they might push for a more aggressive approach to diminishing Western influence, other BRICS members, particularly China, might prefer a more gradual, less antagonistic transition. Finding a middle ground will be key.
It's like they're trying to orchestrate this incredibly complex dance on a global scale, but everyone's hearing a different tune.
A very chaotic dance indeed. And it's crucial to remember that each of these countries is ultimately pursuing its own endgame. Russia, as we discussed, wants to regain global standing, weaken the impact of Western sanctions. Iran is seeking greater financial freedom to advance its ideological goals, increase its influence in the Middle East.
And China, well, they've always been playing the long game. It seems like this initiative plays perfectly into their goal of establishing the yuan as a major global currency.
You're right. This seems to fall right into their lap, strategically. But it's not just about the bigger players like China and Russia. We have to remember that Brazil and South Africa bring their own perspectives and priorities to the table as well.
That's true. They often seem to get somewhat overshadowed by their more assertive counterparts within BRICS.
It's a common misconception that they have less influence. But the truth is, their roles are crucial to BRICS's overall success. Both Brazil and South Africa, they bring a distinct perspective, focusing heavily on economic development, advocating for a fairer global financial system, one that doesn't disproportionately favor Western nations. They provide a valuable counterbalance to the more assertive agendas of Russia and Iran.
Okay, I'm starting to grasp the complexity of this situation. You've got this web of motivations, potential conflicts, and long-term goals all playing out against a backdrop of global uncertainty. But let's go back to that chilling comparison. The report makes the idea that the current climate is reminiscent of the fragility of the world just before the end of the Cold War. What specific similarities do they see, and what kind of conflicts could potentially arise from this power shift?
The report emphasizes that the world is at a tipping point. Just as the Cold War saw the U.S. and the Soviet Union vying for dominance, we're now potentially seeing a shift away from a U.S.-led world order to a more multipolar system. The concern is that this transition could create a power vacuum, leading to miscalculations and conflicts as nations scramble to secure their interests.
And those conflicts, they wouldn't just be contained within, say, the Middle East or Eastern Europe. We're talking about potential ripple effects across the globe.
Absolutely. Take, for example, the existing tensions between China and the West, particularly regarding Taiwan. Any move towards a new financial order that diminishes U.S. influence could embolden China, potentially escalating those tensions into something far more dangerous. It's a delicate situation with global ramifications.
This is already a lot to process, and it feels incredibly significant, even if the average person isn't thinking about these global power dynamics on a daily basis.
You're right. It's easy to feel disconnected from these massive geopolitical shifts, but the reality is they impact everyone.
Let's connect the dots here. How could a move away from the US dollar or a less US-centric world actually impact someone listening to this right now?
Well, for starters, let's consider the value of the dollar. If a BRICS currency gains traction, or even if the global demand for the dollar simply drops, we could see inflation and instability in markets worldwide. That means your money might not go as far at the grocery store, your investments could be affected, and global trade could become more expensive and unpredictable, affecting everything from the price of electronics to the availability of certain foods.
Wow, those are tangible impacts that hit close to home.
And that's just the economic side of things. Geopolitically, a shift in power dynamics could mean a less stable world overall. As we discussed, there's a concern that regional conflicts could escalate without the U.S. playing as much of a peacekeeping role, which has been a cornerstone of international relations for decades.
So the possibility of a more chaotic, less predictable world is a real concern. And while the report focuses heavily on these potential downsides, are there any potential upsides to a less U.S.-centric world order?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's something the report grapples with as well. There's an argument to be made that a more multipolar world could actually be a more stable one in the long run, a world where power is more evenly distributed and no single nation hold all the cards.
It's easy to get lost in the geopolitical jargon, but the reality is these shifts could reshape the world as we know it.
Exactly. Think of it like this. If the global financial system were a play, right now it's like the U.S. dollar is the lead actor. But with this BRICS initiative, we're seeing other actors, like the yuan, trying to step into the spotlight. Now, that could lead to a more dynamic, more interesting performance overall, but it could also lead to chaos and confusion, both on stage and off.
Okay, that's a helpful analogy. So if the dollar's role is diminished, what are some potential real-world consequences?
Well, for starters, it could affect how we travel and do business abroad. If the dollar isn't as widely accepted, we might see a shift towards using other currencies or even digital currencies for international transactions. Imagine like planning a trip to, say, South Africa and having to navigate a whole new financial system just to pay for your souvenirs.
That's definitely something most people don't consider when booking a flight.
Right. And on a larger scale, it could impact global trade. If transactions become more expensive or complicated due to currency fluctuations, it could drive up the cost of imported goods, everything from electronics and clothing to food and medicine.
So this potential shift could have a ripple effect on our wallets and our access to everyday items. What about the geopolitical implications? A less U.S.-centric world, is that inherently a bad thing?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There's a case to be made that a more multipolar world, where power is more distributed among different nations and blocs, could actually be more stable. It could lead to, less unilateral action and more collaboration on global issues like climate change and poverty.
So instead of one global superpower calling the shots, we'd see a more collaborative approach to solving global challenges.
Exactly. Imagine a scenario where, instead of relying solely on the U.S. for peacekeeping efforts, regional powers like China, India, and the EU take on more responsibility in their respective spheres of influence. It could potentially lead to more effective solutions tailored to specific regional needs.
It's a compelling thought, but of course there's always the flip side. Is there a risk that this shift could embolden certain actors with, shall we say, less than peaceful intentions?
That's a very real concern. A multipolar world without clear rules and strong alliances could create opportunities for countries with, let's say, expansionist ambitions or authoritarian tendencies to exert their influence. We could see an increase in regional conflicts and a weakening of the international institutions that have helped maintain a certain degree of global order since World War II.
It's a lot to wrap our heads around, so much uncertainty, so many potential paths this could take. Where does this leave us? What are some key takeaways from this deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we're living in a time of extraordinary change. The global balance of power is shifting, and the outcome of this shift is far from certain. We could be heading toward a more multipolar, collaborative world, Or we could be on the brink of a period of increased instability and conflict.
So what can we do with this information?
Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay critical. Question the narratives being presented, consider different perspectives, and don't be afraid to have those difficult conversations about the future we want to see. This isn't just about economics and geopolitics. It's about the kind of world we want to leave for future generations.
This deep dive has certainly given us a lot to think about. It makes you wonder, what would a truly equitable and stable multipolar world look like? What role would each nation play? And how would we ensure that no one is left behind in this new global order? It's a question worth pondering as we navigate this complex and ever-changing world. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We really hope that you enjoyed today's podcast, but we really only scratched the surface. If you want to explore any of the themes discussed in more detail, see the show notes or visit us at rockandturner.substack.com. Oh, one more thing. Be sure to like the episode, share it with others, and save it to your favorites so that you don't miss future episodes. Until next time, we wish you every success with your investments.